Welcome to another episode of The Consulting Curve, the community approach to clients and consulting. Brought to you each week by BizDrivers.biz, founded by Peter Selby, a trusted profit and growth advisory to companies and consultants around the world. Tune in each week and learn how you can take that journey from corporate to consulting. Welcome to another episode of The Consulting Curve with Peter Selby. My name is Kevin Pruitt. I'm your host, and this is the third part in the first segment, or the first category in our series that is really under the sales conversion drivers. Week one, we just did an intro. The very first episode just kind of did an intro, tried to lay the framework and groundwork around advising in the new economy, and touched on some really interesting topics. If you haven't listened to that initial episode, I encourage our listeners to go back and kind of start the series, because it really does build week after week, or every bi-week builds on the previous episode. And then we really kind of doubled down in the sales conversion drivers and talked about company brand. We talked about the sales closure code in episode 3. And today we're really talking about branding and a growth operating system. But you're going to talk a little bit more about that and bring some clarity to that subject. But Peter, how are things on that side of the planet?
Warmer than where you are by the looks of it. It depends where you are in the world, I guess.
Absolutely. I told him I'm wearing the Steve Jobs. That's right. Got my Steve Jobs suit on, with the mock turtleneck. You're going to have to look on YouTube to see what I'm talking about. But yeah, Peter, share a little bit about the topic we're going to talk about today, and let's drill down.
Yeah, sure. Look, I've really been looking forward to this, actually. It's just probably the core of what people need to do if they're going to have a reliable growth process for an advisory practice. And it's one of the areas that we see that catch people out probably more than anything else. When you look at the challenges that advisors face in the new economy, and we split this series, if you like, into the things that convert sales, the things that add client value, and the things that help with having more customers to choose from. And more people are challenged in converting opportunities than everything else. It's probably the dreaded Pareto law that in play there. But and this is the core of that. If you look at how people connect to the markets, there is a bunch of things that need to happen, and you've got to be able to do all of those things. You can't just sort of cherry pick, because it won't work. So I was going to talk a little bit about that today, what that's the sort of system that you might need around that, and some of the things to be thinking about, because it simply is so basic to being able to grow a reliable business.
Yeah, we touched on kind of the company brand in episode 2 a little bit, and I know that we can kind of connect these two episodes together. But what's the shift that happens between, say, attaching yourself to the company brand, and then now you're introducing your network into the equation?
Well, exactly that. It's the model around the presence, the reach, the presence, and the conversion. So if you think about the brand helps give you a presence, but it's just a brand. It's a silent interaction, if you like. It gives you some authority because it's a brand of a company rather than an individual. But if you don't do anything with it, it's a bit like turning up. You imagine turning up to an industry conference of some kind, and you walk into this hall with 100 or 200 potential customers, and then go hide in the corner. You've got to interact. So
what a waste! What a waste!
Yeah, exactly. And if you think about a presence in a market, it could be a digital presence or a physical presence, but that presence nonetheless is an essential part of growth. So, and nowadays it's more digital than it ever was before. So that how you're perceived in that digital presence is really important. So your personal brand and the authority around that brand is really critical. Whether it's a brand within a brand, so for instance, if you had a company brand, but as an individual, you have your own authority. What are you a specialist in? That needs to be really clear. And, think of the LinkedIn platform where, well, LinkedIn and Facebook especially, where a lot of advisors reside from a market perspective. Your website is your profile at the end of the day. It's not just about the company website. Your personal website is your profile. It's the first thing people
more important. Actually,
absolutely.
maybe more important than the website, the company website.
Look, absolutely. If somebody sees a name on a company website, or they're going to meet with somebody, or they're thinking about contacting, the first thing they do is go to LinkedIn, see what these guys, So it's really important. But what's as important as you having a very clear authority is having the right network around that authority. And another common thing we see is people have spent a lot of effort optimizing their profiles and getting a really clear message, but their audience isn't aligned to that message. It's the wrong audience. And this takes constant focus, because over the years you connect with all sorts of people on LinkedIn, yet your focus or your market may change over time. So is your audience still relevant? I mean, there's a bit of a discipline to flushing your network and making sure that your network is where you're doing business, not forgetting that LinkedIn's not a social tool. Save that for Facebook. Yeah. LinkedIn's about business, right? And the people that you're connected to on LinkedIn should be the people you're trying to do business with. If you want to have a chat about something else, go to Facebook and do it. So, it's really important. There's another element.
On, real quick about the network thing. I was actually watching another video this week that had something was really interesting. I think a germane point here that said this startup founder said, I flush the bottom 10% every year. And he talked about his staff. He talked about vendors. He talked about clients. It was amazing how he just churned the bottom 10% out of the way. And as you were talking about, I mean, just thinking of networks as being organic, they need to be nurtured. They need to be, they need to be tended to. They need to be, loved, so to speak. So yeah, carry on.
Well, but it's true, and it almost feels a little ruthless that you might disconnect from people in your LinkedIn stream. Mm. But not forgetting, it is a business stream. It's not a social thing. You're not going to offend anybody. Yeah. But if you've got 50% of your stream that isn't aligned to what you're doing or saying, you're just wasting all that opportunity. So it is pretty important.
I love the idea of just, when you talk about networks, though, I mean, it's just not any network. I mean, it really is, talk a little bit about the difference between just kind of your network in its entirety versus a warm segment of your network.
Sure. I mean, and that's a great example. If you think of a good example in LinkedIn, for instance, would be your first level contacts versus your second and versus your third, and it grows exponentially. If you've got a couple of thousand LinkedIn connections at level 2, you've probably got 500,000 to 1 million, and level 3, a few 100 million, and so the network's enormous if you look at it from that perspective. But then inside that first level, there's only an element of that will trust you. And it's a very good point to raise, because the trusted network, what we call our warm network, are people that trust us at some level and would interact with us, trust what we have to say, or know us already and have done business with us before, whatever it may be. The cold network, of course, still could be a first level network. I mean, it's not like you're going to know everybody in your LinkedIn stream. I mean, I'm using LinkedIn as an example, but it could be anything. And they might be people that know your name but don't know you at all. Well, they don't trust you, so it's not warm. Warm's about trust. Mm-hmm. And when you think of advisory services, it really is simplistic from a point of view that customers are buying trust at the end of the day. They trust. They've got to trust you personally, and they've got to trust you can solve their problems. And if they don't have both those boxes ticked, you won't get the gig. It's as simple as that. So the network, it's this organic idea of a network it's also critical to grow the warm network, the network of people that trust you. And this brings us to a point where people's networks are, from a business perspective, are generally a lot smaller than they think because of the laws of 80-20. 20% of your customers are 80% of your revenue, 20% of your network is going to be 80% of your business activity. So there's 80% of your current network will never do business with you. And that, that message, if anything comes out of today's message, that is it. 80% of the, so, if you had 1,000 people on LinkedIn, 800 of them are not going to do business with you.
That is, Pareto is everywhere. The Pareto Principle truly is everywhere.
It is. And it probably plays out nowhere more profoundly than in the marketing space. Mm-hmm. So, and it's another common thing that we see when we're helping people. People start out on the advisory road and they're early in the learning curve. And they have these huge networks generally because they've had successful corporate careers, whatever it may be. Think, I'll be fine. I know so many people. Man, no worries. I've got business for years. And then they run out. People forget them, or they don't want to do business with them, or they're not interested anymore. And actually, if you look at 20% of your network, it's a lot smaller than you think it is. And then there's another problem. You've got to know where that 20% is in the 100%. And that's another issue. So your warm network is really quite small. And the classic, I guess, tendency is for people then to start to market themselves into a network where nobody knows them. And that's very difficult. And corporations do that, of course, by having sales teams. It's a very inefficient way of selling. So they have these sales teams, and these sales teams grow to be big enough to drive the amount of sales required to make the company profitable. And the model there is quite simple. We talk to everybody, and eventually we'll get some sales. But of course, as an individual or as a smaller company or as a professional services company, you don't have those sort of resources. So you have to be far more effective in getting engagement. So marketing to the cold space, you just don't have the resources for it. What's critical is to grow the warm space, and then you work the warm space, not the cold space. So a common mistake that's made. And that makes, of course, growing your warm network absolutely critical. And there are some, there's a real bunch of techniques you need to use to do that. You can't just say, well, I'm going to connect with, connecting with people doesn't make them trust you. There's some things you've got to do to warm that relationship.
How do referrals come into play in this? Like, are you working your kind of the 20% of your warm network that are buying from you? Are you working that network to utilize them as kind of ambassadors to reach new clients? Are you continuing to work in that 20% space? What's the path of least resistance, I guess, in the sales conversion model?
Great question. I mean, there's two paths really. There is the path to engage the 20% of your network that is currently there, and whilst you are doing that, you are also growing that that total number. So that 20% number is growing in numbers as you go. And yes, referrals are great. And what makes referrals so effective is the trust is transferred. Not forgetting it's trust that people are buying. So when somebody that trusts you recommends you to someone else that trusts them, their trust transfers with it. Well, if Fred says this guy's good, then he must be, because I trust Fred. So that it's very, very powerful. The next level down from a referral is engaging with somebody that already trusts you. And that's what I'm talking about here. You've got to grow. So this model, it's a circular system, really, when you think about it, of having reach in the first place. So how far are you reaching into the market? Are you reaching into the right markets? Are you reaching into the right networks? And then when you get there, having a solid presence that's going to generate trust and authority, and then converting opportunities into work. So there's a sort of circular process that people need to go through. And it sounds a bit complex, I guess, and it is. In actual fact, there are 8 or 9 key elements to having a good growth process. And you need to have a cadence on all of those things, not just a couple. So the more that you can build some sort of system around it, the more effective it is, but also the less time it takes. You can't spend 50% of your time in marketing activity. Whether you're part of a company or whether you're an individual, you just can't do that. So, in fact, we actually have a growth operating system that we use with our consultants that we have in our membership, because keeping these sort of 9 elements front of mind is actually quite difficult. So we have a thing called an advisory management plan that helps people have a cadence on all 9 things and keep it in front of mind all the time. And if you do it like that, you only need a very small amount of time in any one week to do the right things you need to do. But if you don't do them all, even if you only do half of them, none of it will work. It's very interdependent. And that's another thing that's probably underestimated, I guess, in thinking about growth.
Well, you talked earlier.
That sounded pretty complicated, didn't it? I didn't mean it to sound.
You know what? It made perfect sense. And I kind of want to circle back just for a second with you. You talked earlier, kind of the steps that, reach leading to presence, leading to conversion. And it's interesting because reach and presence as well is completely useless if it doesn't lead to conversion.
Oh, absolutely.
So how do you kind of get over that last hump?
Oh, I mean, again, it's about the conversion from a point of view of, well, really 2 things: really understanding the issue that you're working through with your potential customer, but also the deep level of trust that they must have. Because you have to remember, if you are going to be hired as an advisor, whether as a company or as an individual, you're tampering with somebody's business one way or another. And there's 2 outputs to that. You either, if it goes wrong, there's 2 outputs to that. One is the company makes less money, or the individual that hires you gets sacked. It really does depend on the environment. So they're going to be extremely risk averse in hiring companies. And there's a world that exists between, some of the larger consulting houses that you may not hear the best stories about. I mean, they're all very capable, of course. I don't mean it that way, but their primary offering is actually trust. If we hire this big company, they're a known entity, and nobody's got hired for hiring Boston Consulting.
Yeah,
nobody's got fired for hiring Boston Consulting. So this is safety around the engagement. Well, if you then come to independent consulting companies or individuals, that safety net's not there. So you have to generate that same amount of trust without the safety net around you of a very large corporation. So, if you're not able to do that, you're not able to generate work. It's as simple as that. So this idea that somebody has to trust you personally is very true, and warm relationships are critical, but they've also got to absolutely trust you can solve their problem.
Mm-hmm.
And there we come into a whole other area of how you position for trust and how you position your offering in a way that enables that to happen. And we'll touch on that in the next episode.
Subsequent episodes,
world in itself. But these elements sort of circle around this whole element of this sort of twin level of trust, I guess. And if you think about, if you were to walk in a room full of people, by doing that, you've had reach. You've walked into this room with 200 people in it. And these are all people that are potential customers. You're at a conference somewhere, but you've got to have some sort of presence in that room. And it could be that you're doing some public speaking, or you're attending some speaking events and meeting as many people as you can and networking, whatever it may be. You've got to do something to be present. But equally, there is little point in attending a conference and traveling to get there and having a presence and doing all those things if it's never going to convert to any sort of opportunity. Now, I know it's not instantly connected. You might go to a conference and talk to a few people It's not like they're going to sign up there and then. Something could evolve much, much later. But had you not gone there and had you not had a presence, that trust would never have eventuated. And, if you imagine if you were looking for a service for your company and you've got the giant internet in front of you, and on the other end of that, there's millions of people you can choose from. But you've just met somebody about 6 months ago, you remember at this conference, and you had a coffee together and you got on quite well. He didn't try and sell you or anything, or you just got to know each other. Oh, hang on a minute, he does exactly what I'm looking for. That's going to be your first port of call because the initial trust is already there.
Yep. Is it broader than just trust? Is it, I've heard on other, I guess, consultants talk about the idea of it's not just trust, it's know, like, and trust. It's almost like a maybe a little broader than, I can trust somebody and not like them and not want to do business with them. But it's almost like, is there something more in relationship?
The reason why you like people is because you trust them at some level.
That may be true.
And if the sort of, that guy definitely knows what he's doing, and most people seem to like him, but I don't know, the hairs stand up on the back of my neck when I talk to him. It's because there's something missing in the trust element.
Yeah.
But you could get on with somebody extremely well, and this is the other part of this that's really underestimated. You can get on with somebody really well and have known them for years, but if they're not 110% convinced that you can solve their problem, they're still not going to engage you.
Yeah.
And they would rather engage somebody they know less well, but are more convinced could solve the problem. So you really do have to do both of those things.
Yeah, that's such an interesting approach to the word trust. It's not just trust relationally; it's trust that you can solve my problem. That
without
that's such a great
risk
way.
or my company at risk. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, man, this is such a great topic this week. Is there anything that we just haven't touched on? Just wrap us up as we're.
Well, it kind of touches so many things, but and we'll get to some of this is very closely connected to what we're going to talk about in the next episode, because the way you position with a customer is reliant on that trust as well. But I think if there's anything to take from this, don't underestimate how small your warm network actually is as a percentage of your overall known network. And the fact that you really do need to systemize these 8 or 9 elements of a growth machine of some kind, make it as systematic as you can, make it as rapid as you can, and focus on all of the elements, have a cadence around all of them. We have a whole section in our membership training program just around these 8 or 9 elements, because they're so fundamental. If you don't do every single one, it just doesn't work. And it probably took us a few years ourselves and a few scars to understand what those elements are, because you can try very hard in 2 or 3 elements and still not make any progress because you're not doing the other ones, But yeah.
There we go. Peter, what a way to wrap up. And, I think we've done our listeners a bit of a disservice over the first few episodes, because we really haven't I don't think we've thoroughly introduced you. So tell us, you keep using the word we. Who is the we behind this great podcast?
Sure. So look, Business Drivers is a company that started back in 2008, based originally in Sydney, and sort of gradually expanded around the world as we picked up customers. And there's 2 elements to the business. We are a profit and growth advisory to companies of varying sizes, really, from small right up to large organizations, primarily Australia, New Zealand, UK, US, and a few other places around the world. And we also are an advisory service to other business consultants. So there's kind of 2 elements to the business. And this obviously is talking on some of the topics around some of the challenges in the very steep learning curve to be a consultant. And interestingly, consulting is a professional career, no matter how you look at it. And it's often not seen that way. It's somebody, well, if I can't if I can't get a job or be a consultant. It doesn't work like that. It's as hard to work at a decent career in consulting as it is to have a good corporate career. But that's the guts of the company. We have very niche markets. We have a bunch of consultants that work in both spaces, some helping consultants, some helping companies, often both. And we've certainly learned a few lessons along the way in the years, and it's been, at the end of the day, I guess we make a living from helping people, so it's a nice place to be. But you learn a lot about the challenges that people face from a company perspective, from an individual perspective. A lot of them are very similar. A lot of the markets, even though they're quite different markets, the challenges people face in making money as a business are quite similar. And the service side of consulting is probably one of the toughest markets to generate opportunity, I think, than anything else that we see.
Well, man, I am so glad that we had a chance here at the end of this episode just to kind of lay the groundwork for biz drivers and what you have going. And I can tell you by personal experience that Peter is not just a theoretician; he's actually a practitioner of nurturing his network. And I've seen it in action. I've seen it live, up close and personal. And Peter, just thanks again for taking time to chat today and really just talking about it, the community approach to clients and consulting through the Consulting Curve podcast. Peter, have a great week.
Thanks, Kevin. Great fun. Love to be here.